She said, "We can't give him that. It will kill him." The nurse poured out the cup of sugary liquid into the sink and retreated to the adjoining room with the doctor to discuss a further course of action. These were not the words I'd expected to hear that day. I was down at my local medical clinic for a routine test. I was in my 40s, my son was around 10 years old, and my wife and I had been happily married for a number of years. I was healthy, I didn't drink, I didn't smoke, and the only problem I could think of was I had to keep going to the bathroom in the middle of the night. And then when I got to work, and then mid-morning, and then lunchtime, and then mid-afternoon, and it was all becoming a bit tiresome. So I sought professional help. A doctor has suggested that we do a glucose load test just to see how my blood sugars would react to adding sugar. He came back with some news. I had diabetes. At that stage, I didn't know what diabetes was. I had a number of friends that were diabetic, but that was the extent of my knowledge. Let's pause for a moment and just have a look at some numbers. In this world, we measure things. And take, for example, temperature. If the temperature is between around about 70 degrees Fahrenheit or 22 degrees Celsius, then we're comfortable. If the temperature goes too low, we start getting cold. If the temperature rises, we get warm. If the temperature goes up a lot, we become uncomfortably hot. It turns out that we measure blood sugar for diabetes in a similar manner. And annoyingly similarly, we have two separate systems of measurement in the world. One is based on volume and one is based on weight. In the US, the numbers go something between, say, 50 and 250, whereas in other parts of the world, they may go between 3 and 15. The World Health Organization recommends that our blood sugar be between 70 and 100 in the US system, or between about 4 and 6 on the other scale. This is where we find that our blood sugar should be for a normal, healthy person. If our blood sugar goes lower, say below 70 or 3 on the other scale, then we can suffer the effects of diabetes, of having low blood sugar. Let me start again. Having low blood sugar can make us feel dizzy or nauseous. And this described my diabetic friends, who had what I thought was the unusual trait of always carrying around a pocket full of jelly beans or snack bars. This was because if they had got dizzy or started feeling nauseous, they could quickly eat something and bring their blood sugar levels back up to a normal level, and thus avoid the risk of fainting, because it's rather difficult to administer jelly beans to yourself when you're collapsed on the floor. What I didn't know at the time was that your blood sugar can also go high at levels of 115 or more, and that's about 7 or more on the other scale. Your blood sugars become a problem. However, at this level, this is sometimes called pre-diabetes. At this level, your sugars can be managed by a change in lifestyle, better nutrition, and more exercise, and your sugars can come down to a sensible level. The World Health Organization tells us that sugar levels above around about 115 or more, or 7 on the other scale, you're defined as being diabetic. This scale can go all the way up from 115 to 250 at the very high end, or between 7 and about 15 in the other system of measurement. The reason we need to be aware of this is that prolonged levels of sugar at this level can have all sorts of consequences on our health. Diabetes can affect many parts of your body. This includes your heart, and so you may be at risk of cardiovascular disease. It may affect your eyes due to the lack of blood flow, and it affects the retinas in your eyes, and the risk is that you may have partial or complete blindness. The other thing that can be affected are your extremities, in your hands and in your feet. Diabetes affects the blood circulation and the nerves. One of the things that may happen in your feet is that your podiatrist will find it difficult to treat because you cannot feel your feet properly. In extreme cases, it can also lead to amputation. So it's a very serious thing indeed. At very high levels of blood sugar, in excess of 250 or about 15, according to the University of Michigan, this can constitute what's called a diabetic emergency. The training manuals for paramedics and emergency medical teams advises that 2 or more readings above this level is a diabetic emergency, and the patient should be immediately rushed to the emergency section of the local hospital. This is because at these levels, more diabetic complications can occur, and you risk that the patient goes into a coma. Even worse, you risk not ever coming out of that coma and not surviving the incident. My doctor came back. He had some more news for me. He asked me how I was. Was I feeling dizzy? Was I feeling nauseous? I said no, I was fine. He told me he'd double-checked the results and gave me my blood sugar level. My sugar level on the day was 475, or 26 in the other scale. The doctor gave me 2 tablets to take immediately, with strict instructions to walk directly out of his office to the pharmacy next door and arm myself with a prescription of maximum dosage of a common diabetic drug. He also advised that I should go and see the diabetic clinic down at our local hospital, and also a follow-up appointment with a specialist endocrinologist. I learnt all about glycemic index and how to use a blood meter. I also learnt something about how to measure foods in bread equivalences. With the endocrinologist, I gained all sorts of insights into how the body worked, how food turned into blood sugar, and how you used the sugar, and how insulin helped that to transfer the energy from your blood into the bloodstream and into your muscles and other organs. I was also told that diabetes is a degenerative disease, that it couldn't be cured and only got worse, and that eventually I would need to inject myself at meal times with insulin and at other times during the day just to keep it under control. To me, this wasn't a very good outlook. I followed the plan that the health professionals and the guidance that was available and managed to get my diabetes levels back down to just being diabetic as opposed to being dangerously diabetic. And this was working, but not as well as I had hoped. I could never get my levels down to back into the normal levels, and I wasn't particularly happy. I decided I need to come up with my own plan, as the system wasn't working for me. If an engineer had to choose a disease that he had to have, then diabetes is the one that is most suitable. Why would you say this? Because engineers love to solve problems, and they love to measure stuff. And one of the great things about diabetes is it can be done With other diseases, you need specialist equipment, you need hospitals, and you need possibly specialist people to interpret the results. And you don't get to test that for a number of weeks. With diabetes, you can just take a small low-cost meter and test your blood and have the answer back within minutes. In my role, our approach to a problem will be to research and analyse that problem, followed by some tests that we would propose to see what would happen, followed by measurements, and we would get results. The whole process is then repeated with more research, more analysis, more tests, more measuring, and more results. We could then compare this result to the previous one and see whether we had got an improvement, or whether things had got worse, or whether it just made no difference whatsoever. Working with this approach, I was able to come up with my own system that worked for me. With the advent of the continuous glucose monitor, which you just stick on your arm and measure with your smartphone, I now have the tools to be able to measure my blood sugars at 1-minute intervals or 15-minute intervals over an 8-hour period. I could tell exactly what a food was doing to me. I could tell exactly how my blood sugars would react to anything that I did. After many tests and measurements, and working with my health professionals as well, because I would go and see my doctors and ask them about the different medications and how it worked with the bodies, and suggest how we could run some extra tests, for we love testing, to see what would happen. I developed a system that worked for me, and I was able to bring my blood sugar levels back down to normal levels. One of the things that diabetics also have to do is take a regular eye test, because diabetes affects the blood vessels in the retina, and should that go out of control, you risk eyesight damage and blindness. And so each year the specialist would check my eyes, and we could identify a spot on my retina that actually had a problem, and you could see a definite outline of what was going on. After working with my plan for a number of years, I went back to see the specialist last year, and they showed me that area where the diabetes had been affecting the blood vessels in my retina. That part had improved. The area that was affected had got smaller. And so my eyesight was actually getting better, not worse. My system consists of 4 parts: of nutrition, of exercise, sleep, and stress. I have some examples that I'd like to share with you in each of these areas, just to give you a bit of an idea of what can be done. For example, we know nutrition and food we put into our bodies to get nutrients and to get energy so that we can carry out our daily tasks. So we eat a meal, our blood sugar will rise, our body will process it, and over time it'll come back to a normal sort of level. Some of the interesting things I've found is this: a single cookie or biscuit, depending where you come from in the world, would raise my blood sugar levels to double what they were originally. A full meal, on the other hand, would only raise to, say, 60 to 70%. And the effects of a meal would only last an hour, an hour and a half. A single cookie would double it in 10 to 15 minutes. And my blood sugars would stay high for over an hour or more. And eventually my body would recover and come back. Interestingly enough, and flying in the face of common recommendation and even common sense, I could also eat a bowl of ice cream. A bowl of ice cream raised my blood sugar levels in 30 minutes to only 50% of the previous levels, and my body would recover within the hour. Similarly, in the area of exercise, I was fortunate. My favourite form of exercise is cycling. And the good thing about cycling is it uses the biggest muscles in your body, your legs, and so offers the maximum opportunity to take the blood sugar from your bloodstream into the muscles and burn it off. One thing I found was exercise, that within an hour I could bring my levels from being in the diabetic level back to the normal level. As an additional bonus, even after I'd stopped exercising, my blood sugar levels would remain level and calm. Combine that with a good night's sleep, and what I found in the morning was my sugar levels were absolutely normal, completely non-diabetic, and had I walked into a normal clinic and they did a simple test, they wouldn't have even picked it up. However, if I'd had a bad night's sleep, my sugar levels would come back towards that diabetic range. Not dangerously, but just at the high end of normal or just slightly into the diabetic range. Similarly, by accident, I noticed when doing some of my tests that a stressful day in the office also increased my blood sugar the next morning, whereas a good day in the office, my sugars were normal. I'd like you to do a short exercise with me. Have a look at the people around you in the room, to your left and to your right, and maybe forward or behind if necessary. And I ask you this question: do they look exactly the same as you? My guess is that the answer is no, unless you happen to be standing next to your identical twin. For we are all uniquely and wonderfully made. I realised at this point that I was the best person to be looking after my own health. I was the one that had to live with myself all the time, and thus I could feel when I was getting a headache or when I was feeling a bit off just from something that I had eaten. You are also the best person that can look after your own health, because you are with yourself all the time. The health professionals can't do that because they're not with you and they don't know all the details of the things that you are doing during the day. Similarly, with exercise, no doctors or life coaches or personal trainers are able to make you go and exercise. It is up to you to take control and go out and exercise. Go out for a walk or a run, play tennis, go swimming, or whatever your form of exercise is, but it's up to you to make that happen. A survey in some aged care facilities asked the residents a question, and it was this: what would you have changed in your life? Many of them answered this: I would spend more time working on my relationships with friends and family. My priorities are my friends and family, my time, and my health, for they are all interrelated. Being more healthy gives me more time and more energy that I can spend on my interests and with friends and with family. Might I encourage you to own your health, to take control, so that you too can have more time for yourself, for your friends and family, and as an example for generations to come. Thank you.